Hey everybody, I'm Jerry Young along with John Lunsford. Hey, we know it's not football season. We get that, although it is spring training.
It is.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of football.
Yeah, a little bit of football. But we got some information that's going to be of interest to everyone, especially our Thompson crew. John, 7A playoff football is about to change. And we've been used to playing the same region, but tell us a little bit about what it is and how it's going to change.
Yeah, so, I don't want to say there's been a lot of complaining, but there's always been a lot of complaining about kind of how the playoffs shape up in 7A, because it's totally different than how it would be in every other classification. So the old system, 5A, 6A, when those were the top classifications, you had 32 teams making the playoffs. You split it up by north and south, but you could play anywhere. I mean, when I was at Homewood, we were Region 4, and we were traveling to Mobile for the playoffs, and that's something that, a school like Thompson or any other, Birmingham area school in Region 3 just won't do anymore. When they play a team from the South, it's going to be either at Jordan-Hare Stadium, Bryant-Denny Stadium, or Protective Stadium, and that's it. So I think there was a lot of questions about, hey, it's always Thompson and Hoover, and it's always Central Phoenix City and Auburn, and that's it. And nobody else gets a chance to go to the state championship. What's a way to potentially fix this? Now, if you're Thompson, you don't want it fixed. It's working pretty well for you. But, you're also thinking, look, Thompson's beating everybody. They're beating Hoover. They're beating Central Phoenix City. They're beating Auburn. Bring it on. Bring on all challengers. So different people have approached this from different angles, and the answer from the AHSAA, which just came out recently, was basically we're going to rotate the regions as we do in class, 1A through 6A. And we're going to let Region 1 play Region 4 sometimes, let Region 2 play Region 3, and so on and so forth, instead of just 1v2, 3v4. And I know it's kind of hard to just think about that in your mind, but really the best thing to do is look at a map. And, the map of the state of Alabama, just imagine a first-round playoff matchup where you got a team from up north with Huntsville, Florence, Bob Jones, James Clemens, the teams that typically make it, traveling all the way down. I don't know what the southernmost team is.
Alma Bryan, I think, or
So,
either Foley could be, depending on where you are.
Any of those teams. Those are teams that I played in high school. We had to go to Fairhope. We had to go to Lad Peebles and play BC Rain. Those were some trips. When you load up the buses and you got to take everybody down there. This year, my alma mater had to go play down at St. Paul's. That's a luxury, 7A Region 3 has had. The furthest you have to ever go is up to Huntsville. So now it's a totally different story, and it's kind of opening things up to where, personally, I don't know how opinionated you want me to get on this, but personally, it could even make for some more issues down the line. I think the solution a lot of people have had for this is seed it 1 through 16, but how do you fairly judge Thompson last year? Let's say they went 7-3 in the regular season, playing some of the top teams in the country with Lipscomb Academy and Buford, versus a team that may play a weaker schedule but go undefeated, who's technically the top seed right there. Most people would say Thompson, the records would say otherwise. So there's no true solution for this, but this is the AHSAA's, kind of shot at, hey, how can we make this a little more competitively balanced, I guess.
If you look at the map, which we just put up there, and we'll stick it back up there again. If you look up north and you look at Florence and you look at those teams, really, Region 3 there, if you look at all those dots, we don't have far to travel. I mean, when we talk about playing Oak Mountain or Spain Park or Hoover, you live in Hoover. We're in Alabaster residents are in Hoover all the time. For us to go past Oak Mountain High School or Spain Park, that's just every week for us. Yeah. It's not like a big deal. Whereas if you look in Region 2, for example, where you got already people traveling. Prattville has to travel down to Dothan just to play a regular season game. That's not a big deal for them to stay on I-65 and go on down to Mobile, for example, when those two regions have to play. But we've had it easy in Region 3. So now even if we have to travel down to Region 2, that's a little bit more of a drive. Of course, 3 and 4, we've always played 4, but we've always, here lately, of course, been the 1 or 2 seeds, so they come to us more than we go to them. We've had that very fortunate. Of course, going to Montgomery is not a big deal either. That won't be a big feat for us. But for Region 3 to have to go to Mobile is going to be our biggest challenge.
Yeah, it is. And when you look at the map, Dothan and Enterprise are the two teams that are so out of whack compared to everywhere else, just strictly based on geography. And really, I guess roads too, because the interstate is going to cut over to Mobile from Montgomery instead of, I guess 231, going down towards Dothan. So it is interesting now if you're Region 2 and if you're a team like Dothan that upset Foley in the first round of the playoffs, you might have to travel based on that. You may play, even if you're a 2 seed, let's say, you may play a team from Huntsville at home, but then you got to go to Huntsville on the road, and you're already traveling that much in region because you have to go so far outside of maybe Enterprise if you're Dothan, but then you're going to have to travel so much more because strictly as the crow flies, going to Mobile schools really isn't that much different than going to the Montgomery area schools that you're playing. So I think for schools like that, it could potentially maybe cause more of an issue because it seems the biggest complaint has been travel. The biggest complaint of why they haven't changed anything is travel. You want to keep it more regional. This is high school. These are kids who are coming out of school. I get it. This isn't the NFL where you can travel like that. But you're opening yourself up to more travel, but not changing the format potentially to where you have the best teams at the top and the teams that barely, squeak their way in the playoffs at the bottom. You're still making, a team like Vestavia, let's say, last year, the 4 seed. Vestavia was a good football team, and they won their first game. If you're making them potentially in the first round have to travel all the way down to Mobile when Region 3 easily could have swept that region, probably would have this past year. And you're making them travel down there when maybe they would have been the better team. So that's why a lot of people have approached it as, look, we're a good team. Let's seed this a little better to where, Thompson's playing Central Phoenix City, Hoover's playing Auburn. It's still maybe the same 4 teams, but you're getting the true 2 best teams in the championship. It's kind of the college football debate we've had for the longest time, trying to get the 2 best teams in the championship.
All right, let me ask you your opinion on this. I saw somebody came out with an idea. Why don't we take the top 16 teams in 7A, forget regions, all right? Put them in there, seed them, and let them play each other. Forget the regions, and if, one plays seed 16 and 2 plays 15, doesn't matter where you got to go. Wouldn't that be more fair?
See, I'm with that, and the only thing I think you have to do is how do you determine those teams? Because like I said, so Thompson last year would have finished behind Hoover in region play. They did. They lost that regular season game. Hoover's region champ. Thompson's 2. So that's understandable. But then where do you rank Thompson compared to Central Phoenix City, compared to Auburn, an Auburn team that they beat, soundly in the state championship game? And you wouldn't know that at that point, obviously, but where do you see them compared to Austin, who won Region 4, to Foley, who kind of came out of the dark to pass Fairhope and win Region 1? I think that's kind of the debate, because then it's like, well, is Thompson really better just because they played, better teams? They still lost those games. Either way, you can look at the Buford game and say that was a blowout. Maybe they're not as good as they should be. There's a million debates people will have, and of course, there's no perfect system. Regardless, I've always kind of leaned towards the NFL system where it's strictly based on your wins and losses, and that's it. But based on that, Thompson would actually be a fairly low seed. And Thompson has clearly been the best team in the state the last 4 years, but they haven't even won their own region the last 2 years. So that's the debate.
You could eliminate that by having the top 2 teams in each region as your top 8 seeds, and then play it from there, and then let the chips fall where they may. So that would give you incentive to finish first or second in your region, and not let any school that wouldn't care about winning game number 10 to make sure that you're seated in the first two spots in the region. So I know you kind of did some playing around with brackets, right? Just like what if, which I know you love to do. So what if Thompson finished second in the bracket, and say we had to go play in the Region 1? Who are some teams down there you do or don't want to play?
Yeah, so, last year with Region 1 was kind of all over the place, and Foley ended up winning the region, Fairhope was second. So those are the 2 home teams as far as who would have hosted Hewitt and Vestavia. Thompson still would have hosted that first round game, with this new format, still would have hosted that. But then you're asking the question, well, as a 2 seed, Thompson would, assuming, chalk holds, which means the best seeded team wins, assuming Foley would have beaten Vestavia in that matchup, well then, instead of the second round matchup, I think, Thompson would have headed to Austin, so that would have been Decatur, which would have been an hour and a half. I'm not real good with directions, but about an hour and a half from here. But instead, you're going down to Foley instead. And that is a much longer drive. And we actually joked about it after that game. It's like, should that happen, boy, it'd be fun to take a trip, down to the Mobile area, go down to the beach. I mean, when I went to play Fairhope when I was at Homewood, it was cool. We got to spend the whole weekend down there. I got to go to Lambert's over at Foley's and, all that kind of stuff. It was an experience that I really hadn't had before when I was in school.
Being a lineman, though, he never caught a roll.
Never caught a roll, but you know what? I ate some rolls.
I know, but you couldn't catch one.
No. But that's, I think it opens up some opportunities in that way that, look, it's something we don't do. We, this year are going to, go to Montgomery and play Opelika, and the other non-region games are going to be at home, with IMG and Clay Chalville. So, if you got to go to Florida, that would be cool, but, the game's at home. So, I think there's some opportunities there, and especially for Huntsville teams that are never going to go down south, because Birmingham's split in lower classifications. Like I said, when I was at Homewood, we were between 4 and 5, which meant sometimes we went up, sometimes we went down. But, this year it would have meant Thompson would have gone to Foley and played a game down there, and then depending on what happens, either played Hoover on the road again, or, it probably would have been Hoover, Hewitt, Trussville, just going off how good the teams were. But, if you switch it around and you switch to where Region 3 is playing Region 2, which is something different that would happen, you're talking about, it's not as much travel, but you're talking about Thompson and a team like Central Phoenix City or Auburn meeting up in the second round, potentially. I mean, that's where it's almost, people are going to start questioning this, I think. You could legitimately have a second round of Thompson versus Auburn, Central Phoenix City versus Hoover, and then just 4 other teams of whatever it happens to be from Region 1 and Region 4. And people are going to say, those are the 4 best teams right there, and they're all knocking each other out. Now it gives another team a chance to go to the Super 7.
That's what, just to be blunt, that's what the Enterprises, the Dothans, the Prattville's, the Florences, the Foleys, that's what they're hoping will happen.
And look, I totally get that.
I know, I get it too.
But, think about it from the quote-unquote better team's perspective.
Right.
If Thompson's got to go through Central Phoenix City and then Auburn or Hoover just to get to the state championship, that's a tough road just to get to a state championship game where they very well may blow that team out, whoever makes it. But that is a tough road for any of those 4 teams that have been clearly the top 4 teams the last few years to try to work their way through to get there.
I agree. Well, it's interesting. By the way, folks, you can keep this video, save it, use it as a reference to go back. So, did we know already what regions are matched up? I haven't seen.
I don't think we know the regions. The other thing you have to remember is seeding in the bracket, because where Thompson was this year, they would have had to have, or they would have hosted a similar seed had they met. So the second seed at Region 4 would have made it. They would have been at home, but if it had been flipped, Thompson would have had to travel. So that also is important, which, side of the bracket you're on, because they flip that every year, kind of depending on, home team. So, one seed out of Region 1 may be in the top left the first time a certain rotation comes around, and they'll be on the bottom half the second time that rotation comes around. So it's actually, I'm trying to think, it's actually a 6-year cycle on the bracket. It's 3 and 3 basically with that, but there's a lot of things that go into that, and we'll basically get that when it comes to the first sports book, I guess, when they start this in a couple of years. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out and where the teams are at that point too.
And to be, quite frank again, if you're in Region 4 and you're playing Region 1 and you are a 3 or 4 seed that has to travel, it's hard enough to go play 1 and 2. Now you've got that long road trip. It's going to make it way more tougher on the 3 and 4 seeds.
It is. You're talking about potentially, depending on the team, a 6 or 7 hour drive, loading up the bus and trying to make it all the way from absolute top to absolute bottom of the state of Alabama.
Yeah, and get there and be tired. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Hey, the kids get out of school on that Friday at least, I guess.
That's right. And they probably get to stop somewhere and eat pretty good.
Yeah.
And remember, folks, this doesn't begin this season. It doesn't start till 2024. So this season, 2023, Region 3 will still play Region 4 just like it has been always. For John Lussford, I'm Jerry Young. Thanks for watching, everybody.